Next on Ebert and Roeper, big summer movie.
Oh,
Anchorman.
Storming your castle on my steed, milady.
The Lovely.
Just showing off. The Clearing.
It stinks seeing your life fall apart.
Before Sunset.
I remember that night better than I do entire years.
Two Brothers.
Lady.
And White Chicks.
Whatever.
I call upon all nations to do everything they can to stop these terrorist killers. Thank you. Now watch this drive.
That's part of maybe the most talked about documentary ever made, Fahrenheit 9/11, which opens this weekend. We're going to take another look at that film, and we'll also take another look at Spider-Man 2. This show is so jam-packed, we better get started. I'm Roger Ebert.
And I'm Richard Roeper. Once again, we've got the early reviews on some of the big movies of the summer, including our first film, Anchorman. And who better than Will Ferrell to play Ron Burgundy, a pompous, clueless, but weirdly charming San Diego anchor in the 70s. Now, Ferrell is a unique comic talent who somehow manages to endear us to the dim-witted, lumpy-bodied, socially inept doofuses he plays in films such as Old School and Elf. This broad satire isn't quite as funny as those two efforts. I'd say the laugh ratio is about 50%, but that's still pretty good.
You have your ubulus muscle that connects to the upper dorsimus. It's boring, but it's part of my life. I'm just going to grab this shirt if you don't mind. Just watch out for the guns. They'll get you.
Christina Applegate is a game comedic foil. She's kind of doing the Cameron Diaz role here as Veronica Corningstone, the ambitious journalist who threatens the all-boys club in the newsroom. Anchorman sometimes almost forgets it's in the 70s, but we do get the inevitable reference to the Starland vocal band.
Sky rockets in flight. Woo! Afternoon delight. Whoop!
You guys have it, I think.
Afternoon delight.
Always a welcome presence, Fred Willard. He's a news producer.
But you and I are mature adults. We've both seen our share of pornographic materials. Oh, you never have? Of course you haven't. How stupid of me. Neither have I. I was just speaking in generalities. Right, I'll stop by the school a little later, Sister Margaret.
I love the off-mic sniping between Ron and Veronica, as well as the narration for this movie, which comes from Bill Curtis, none other than Bill Curtis. Anchorman veers from mild satire to outright farce. It has no interest in sticking to a cohesive storyline, or it doesn't really want to say anything remotely important about the state of TV news in the 70s. It just wants to make us laugh. Will Ferrell, he's a gigantic comedy puppy dog. He'll do anything to please us, and it usually works. Thumbs up for me.
You know, I liked it, too. I liked it because it was funny. And I also liked it because it made some interesting little points about television news. For example,
I don't know. Did it really?
The promos that make the television news team look like a happy family, as if these people live together and kind of spend all their time being perfectly groomed and smiling at each other and nodding at their witticisms. That was funny. And then the stories they have to cover, you know, like the water skiing squirrel and the pregnant panda.
Well, yeah.
I mean, that kind of stuff is still around.
Panda watch, you know, where it's like day 47 of mingling and getting pregnant.
To come out, you know. It's a very funny movie. The one thing I didn't think really worked was the strange brawl involving all of the local anchor teams. Yeah, that weird fantasy.
Yeah, there were a couple of scenes in this movie where I thought, well, this must be a fantasy sequence or a dream sequence, and they weren't, and they should have been. But, you know, a lot of hit and miss, but I mean, I laughed out loud a lot.
It's a funny film. Okay, our next movie is Before Sunset, a sequel to the 1995 film in which a young American man and a young French woman meet in Vienna and spend a long night talking about the meaning of life while they're falling a little bit in love. Played by Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy, they promised to meet again a year later, but now 9 years have passed. He's written a bestseller about their one night together, and she materializes at a book signing in Paris so that their conversation begins again.
Do I look any different? I do.
I'd have to see you naked.
What?
I know, I'm sorry.
In a rush of words, both cautious and risky, they wonder if perhaps that night in Vienna was a sign that they really were meant for one another.
In the months leading up to my wedding, okay, I was thinking about you all the time. I mean, even on my way there, I'm in the car, and a buddy of mine is driving me downtown, and I'm staring out the window, and I think I see you.
Before Sunset takes place almost literally in real time. There are no breaks between the beginning of the movie and the end in terms of the continuity. Like My Dinner with Andre, it's basically one long conversation, an exhilarating, stimulating, thoughtful conversation. Director Richard Linklater co-wrote the movie with Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy, and the screenplay is literate, realistic, thoughtful, and subtle in the way the characters circle one another, trying to figure out what they're really up to. This is a better movie than Before Sunrise. It's more urgent, smarter, wiser about life. And you could say the same thing about the characters. They're a little older now. Thumbs up.
I agree. I think it is a better movie because the characters are more interesting, and Hawk and Delpy each contributed quite a bit to the screenplay, and it's beautiful writing, wonderful acting, and you're so right about Linklater's direction. At first you're thinking, okay, this is just a dialogue movie. They're talking, but you realize you're seeing a lot of Paris in this film as they walk and they get on that boat and they get to her apartment, and the camera moves around with such grace and style and subtlety where it doesn't take you away from what they're saying and yet keeps you involved with what's happening on the screen. So really, top-notch work here.
You know, this movie probably would have been impossible without actors who were very, very smart
and natural,
very literate and very natural. This is very, very good acting, even though it seems to be just two people having a conversation.
Yeah, in lesser hands, it would have been maybe a disaster. And I love sequels like this and Barbarian Invasions that catch up with characters 10 or 15 years down the line. I like to see these guys 10 years from now.
Yeah, I was going to say that I keep doing this every 10 years, like the 7 Up series.
That'd be wonderful. Okay, our next movie is The Lovely, a biography of the great Cole Porter that has a lot more of an true Hollywood story feel than Night and Day, the sanitized version of Porter's life starring Cary Grant. This film doesn't just hint at Porter's sexuality. In fact, his love life is given as much screen time as his timeless music. I thought Kevin Kline was wonderful as the witty, wisecracking Porter, and Ashley Judd gives one of her best performances as Porter's adoring and understanding to a fault wife, Linda.
But I have other interests. Interests, the pursuit of which some people might find cruel to you.
You mean men?
Yes, men.
Let's just say you like them more than I do.
Some of Porter's most enduring hits are interpreted by an interesting array of pop stars, including Robbie Williams, Elvis Costello, Sheryl Crow, and Alanis Morissette. Director Irwin Winkler has a veteran's appreciation for show business, and he confidently chronicles Porter's rise to fame and fortune and his physical and career setbacks. In the end, we feel that Cole Porter never quite loved anybody as much as the characters in his songs loved one another. Thumbs up.
Thumbs up for me, too. I love this movie. You know, what's interesting is it's often the case in musical biopics that they try to say, oh, the songs really reflect the life. But in Cole Porter's case, apparently they really did. And if you listen to these lyrics, people heard them at the time as heterosexual in orientation, but actually they could also be seen as gay in orientation. And it's interesting how every song then begins to sound a little bit ambiguous and more complicated than you thought.
You know, it's interesting because it's almost like they're single entendre when you hear the lyrics now, but you think, you know, there was a certain sadness behind Cole Porter's life because he could never really come out of the closet, so he did all this music and he had this double life going on.
I think he really did love Linda, and she certainly loved him, and they managed this relationship despite all of the complications and all of the pain.
And you know, it was just so good to see Ashley Judd in a role where she didn't have a gun in her hand or a knife to her throat to remind us what a good actress she is.
She is very good in this.
Okay, when we come back, Robert Redford and Willem Dafoe face off in The Clearing, plus another look at Spider-Man 2 and Fahrenheit 9/11.
This is an impressive crowd.
Oh, no, not. Hey, that's cruel.
You gotta learn how to swim. So I taught the children.
You did not. Anyway, I taught them to swim.
Robert Redford and Helen Mirren play a comfortably married couple in The Clearing, a movie that works because of the intense, convincing performances by all of the actors. Their marriage has had problems, but it has survived, and for them, this day begins like any other day. Meanwhile, we've seen another man getting up and going to work, a man who lives in a different world than Redford and Mirren. Played by Willem Dafoe, he greets Redford at the end of his driveway.
What are you doing? If you make a noise, I'll shoot.
Dafoe is a kidnapper, not a professional criminal, but a working man who thinks of himself as a failure in life and thinks that Redford's money will solve his problems. During a long day, he explains himself.
If you were in my shoes, wouldn't you do it?
No, I wouldn't.
Do you have any idea what it's like to see your wife go to work every day instead of floating her pool?
The Clearing cuts between those two men walking through the forest and Helen Mirren dealing with the police, the FBI, and their children. There are two different time frames at work here, something we don't notice to begin with. Redford and Mirren make their characters very real, and Willem Dafoe gives one of his best performances as a man who has given a lot of thought to his strategy for this day. He's so earnest it's painful, which is maybe why the ending of the movie is so strangely powerful. Dafoe knew what he wanted to do and how to do it, but he didn't know how it might make him feel. Thumbs up.
Thumbs up for me as well, and you're so right about the time structure. The first time I've seen this film twice, and the first time it took me a while to catch up with it, and then you're like, okay, this is really interesting how this is working. But both times, the acting was very effective, even when you know where the story is going. Helen Mirren, I think, gives an Oscar-worthy supporting performance as the wife. We learn a lot about their marriage as the investigation continues. And the dynamic between the Redford and Defoe characters is so interesting because you think, well, the kidnapper should have the upper hand here, but Redford has a way of showing him, hey, look, you may have a gun on me, but let's not kid ourselves here about who's the superior human being.
Redford is a natural leader, and Defoe is a loser and always will be a loser. And, you know, this is the first film with Robert Redford in it that has ever played at Sundance, the film festival that he runs. And they were able to do a film that was worth making.
Yeah, powerful piece of work. Okay, speaking of powerful pieces of work, Michael Moore's Fahrenheit 9/11 opens nationwide this weekend. And what a shame that the MPAA has settled the film with an R rating. I think everyone 12 and older should see this movie, whether you're a Bush backer, a flaming liberal, or an undecided. Now, since we gave Fahrenheit 9/11 2 major thumbs up a few weeks ago on this show, I've heard from a lot of conservatives saying we shouldn't even call this film a documentary because it's hardly neutral. Well, guess what? All documentaries have a point of view.
How could Congress pass this Patriot Act without even reading it?
Sit down, my son. We don't read most of the bills.
In Roger and Me and Bowling for Columbine, Moore placed himself in the center of the action. And even though the clips the studio provided us feature Moore heavily, he wisely stays on the sidelines for the most part in this movie. But he does point the camera at himself as he confronts some pro-war congressmen.
Michael Moore. How are you doing? Good, good. Trying to get members of Congress to get their kids to enlist in the Army and go over to Iraq.
I'm not saying every single frame of this film is the gospel, but I'd sure like to see a conservative filmmaker make a rebuttal movie. In the meantime, fans of good movies should see Fahrenheit 9/11. It contains some of the biggest laughs, some of the most interesting revelations, and some of the most heart-tugging moments of any movie of any kind this year.
You're right. And you know, there is a movie coming out that attacks Michael Moore. It doesn't defend President Bush, it just attacks Michael Moore.
Can't wait to see it.
We've asked for a copy of this film, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. You know, the congressman, in that scene where he was asking them if their sons had enlisted to fight in Iraq, complained that they were ambushed. But of course they were ambushed. That's what it is. It's an ambush. He's trying to embarrass them, and it's fairly easy to do because they're not too eager, in most cases, to have their sons fighting that war.
Well, you know, Moore is a very skilled filmmaker, and yes, he's occasionally going to leave out certain things, and he's going to spin things a certain way. Everybody does when they have a camera and they want to get a point of view out there.
People seem to be shocked that anyone has a point of view unless it agrees with them.
Yeah.
For example, political spots. Bush supporters and Kerry supporters aren't bothered by their own spots. They're only bothered by the other one.
Well, I just hope that, once again, same thing with The Passion of the Christ and other controversial movies. People have all these opinions. I think maybe see the movie and then let us know what you think about it.
What an interesting idea.
I know,
okay. Spider-Man 2 opens next Wednesday, or actually Tuesday at midnight, and I think it may be the best superhero movie I have ever seen. We reviewed it on an earlier show, but I want to take another look at the way director Sam Raimi respects the classic Spider-Man character by giving full attention to the dilemma of Peter Parker.
What do you want?
I want you to find your friend, Spider-Man. Tell him to meet me at the West Side Tower at 3 o'clock.
I don't know where he is.
Find him. Or I'll peel the flesh off her bones.
Spider-Man 2 is a much better, deeper, more effective film, and Maguire's complexity as an actor is fully utilized here. He's good at playing self-effacing characters who seem to doubt themselves, and even when he's Spider-Man, he seems vulnerable, as in those scenes where he loses his web-spinning ability. This is a superhero movie for people who don't go to superhero movies. I'm telling my friends, they say, I don't want to see Spider-Man. I say, you might be surprised.
Yes, you do, because if you took out all the action scenes, which I certainly don't want to do, you'd still have an interesting movie here.
Yes, you would.
And part of it is because the Spider-Man character is so flawed. He's younger than the usual superhero character. He's got all these problems. He can't make ends meet. He's getting fired from jobs. And, you know, you feel like he's vulnerable. I also think it's key that, unlike in Batman and in Superman, where you have, like, Gotham and Metropolis, New York City's like a character in this movie. You know, I mean, Spider-Man exists in a kind of realistic New York City with the tabloid newspapers and people who see him and go, oh, yeah, there's Spider-Man on the job. Sometimes they help him. Sometimes they wonder if he's a bad guy.
One thing that you said the first time we reviewed the movie was you didn't like Dr. Octopus as much as you liked the Green Goblin in the first movie. Now, I have given it a lot more thought, and I would like to tell you that I think Dr. Octopus is at least as good and maybe better than the Green Goblin, and that the performance is fabulous.
Well, I'll think a little bit more about that Doc Ock thing as I'm walking around. I mean, as I said in the first review, the villains aren't even the key thing here. It's not like Batman where it's like, oh, Joker, Penguin, he's going to take on these different villains because there's a lot more going on.
But the villains
with this
at least make every movie distinctive.
I'm so glad you were thinking about Doc Ock in your free time.
Thinking about Dr. Ock all the time.
Very
Coming up next, the family film Two Brothers plus the Wayans brothers transform themselves into white chicks.
Next is Two Brothers, one of the most amazing animal adventure fables ever captured on film. Now, Guy Pearce is the male lead, but the real stars are the tigers, Kumail and Sangha. Hunters shoot the cub's father, and Kumail and Sangha are separated, with Kumail sold to a circus. Kumail's mother tries to save her cub. And the other cub, Sangha, becomes a plaything for the child of the regional governor. Now, some 30 real tigers of all ages and some animatronic creations and models were used in Two Brothers, but the net effect is seamless. Even when we see things that couldn't possibly involve real tigers, we're convinced that it's authentic. Thumbs up for this unique tale.
A marginal thumbs down for me, although I agree it's an amazing animal adventure, and the photography of the tigers is fabulous. The first quarter of the movie is like a documentary about these two tigers, and I really enjoyed it. But you know, the problem is, these tigers are kind of turned into Disney characters. I mean, they all but speak English, and they do things that indicate they have human values, and they're never, at one point they say, oh, he can't be a pet anymore, he's got the taste for blood. Well, what was this tiger living on for all of the months up until that scene?
I don't know, kibbles and bits. I mean,
obviously, you know, these tigers, they kill. That's how they live. They kill things.
I know, Roger,
in this movie, it's like they're vegetarian.
Well, that's, you know, hey, that's why I said it's a fable, but I mean, that's what's so great about it.
I would recommend it for the younger kids in the family. I think adults are going to say those tigers are awfully smart.
Well, they are, and you know, you're recommending.
They seem to understand everything everybody says to them.
Oh, you recommended Garfield, and you're not recommending them.
Yeah, but the two movies approach totally different audiences in totally different ways, and you can't compare one to another.
I just did.
I know, but you shouldn't have. Okay, the Wayans family has produced some funny movies, but White Chicks is not one of them. If we don't agree on this one, I'll be amazed. Keenan Ivory Wayans directs, and Marlon and Sean Wayans stars FBI agents assigned to protect a couple of rich bimbos from being kidnapped. As a lure for the kidnappers, they decide to disguise themselves as the bimbos.
What's up, money? You got a problem? Nah, yo, hold my poodle. Hold my poodle.
How could anyone be fooled by that makeup? They look like the giant heads with the moving lips on Conan O'Brien's show. The plot is completely conventional, the characters are off the shelf, the slapstick is pitiful, and White Chicks earns a place of pride on my list of the year's worst films.
Worst movie of the year, you're so right. The makeup is just hideous. It doesn't work on any level whatsoever. I mean, when they did the makeup, they should have gone onto the set and said, well, guess what, everybody, go home. We don't have a movie.
The makeup the makeup test should have alerted them.
They look like something out of Vanilla Sky when Tom Cruise was wearing that mask. I mean, they're scary looking.
You're right.
And for everyone to fall for it, I mean,
unbelievable.
From that launching point, it's dead. And then beyond that, the jokes don't work. The physical comedy doesn't work. The stupid kidnapping plot doesn't work. I'm telling you, it's the worst movie of the year.
I'd like to put in a personal plea for no White Chicks 2.
Okay, coming up next, I've got a special announcement to make. Now, a special note, the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce has announced the 2005 inductees into the Hollywood Walk of Fame. It's quite a list. The honorees include Kevin Kline, Julianne Moore, Tom Brokaw, Al Green, Rod Stewart, and my partner, Roger Ebert. It is a well-deserved honor. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. You know, it came as a real surprise.
Really?
It came on my birthday, so what a nice birthday present to get a star on the Hollywood Boulevard.
And then there'll be a ceremony next year where you're actually there on your star, and you could either be in front of like a lingerie shop or like at a great location, and then people come out and polish the star.
Yeah, I'm pricing brass polish already, yes.
Cool stuff. Okay, recapping this week's movies, 2 thumbs up for Anchorman. It opens in 2 weeks. 2 thumbs up for Before Sunset. 2 more thumbs up for DeLovely, and 2 more thumbs up for The Clearing. Those 3 movies open next week. 2 thumbs up for Fahrenheit 9/11. 2 thumbs up for Spider-Man 2. It opens on Wednesday. We split on Two Brothers, and 2 thumbs down as far as they possibly can go for White Chicks.
We will be back in a moment.
Visit our website at ebertandroper.tv or at movies.com. Now in theaters. Brought to you by Orville Redenbacher. Start popping today.
Next week, we'll be back with a special show rounding up the best and worst movies of the year so far.
Remember, you can hear all our recent reviews at ebertandroper.tv or at movies.com, and read us in print at suntimes.com. We'll leave you with a look at movies now in theaters, and until next week, the balcony is closed.
2 thumbs up for The Terminal. We split on Around the World in 80 Days. And 2 thumbs up for Dodgeball.
Nobody makes me bleed my own blood. Nobody!
Closed captioning for Ebert and Roeper is brought to you by